Lisa stared at the elegant wedding invitation sitting on her kitchen counter, her coffee growing cold in her trembling hands. The golden lettering seemed to mock her as she read the names again. Ryan Thompson and Jessica Miller, request the honor of your presence. But it wasn't just the invitation that made her stomach twist into knots. Attached to it was a handwritten note that felt like a punch to the gut. Dear Lisa, we know you have the most beautiful voice in our town. Would you please sing at our wedding ceremony? It would make our special day perfect. We can't imagine anyone else doing this for us. Love, Ryan and Jessica. She let out a bitter laugh that echoed through her empty kitchen. The nerve of this man was absolutely incredible. 3 years of dating, countless promises about their future together, and then he had vanished from her life like she meant nothing. Now here he was asking her to sing at his wedding to the woman he had left her for. Lisa's mind raced back to that horrible day. 8 months ago, when Ryan had shown up at her apartment with that familiar guilty look on his face. She could still remember his exact words, "I think we need to take a break. I need to figure myself out." What he really meant was that he had already figured himself out with Jessica, the blonde receptionist from his office who was 10 years younger and didn't ask difficult questions about commitment. The worst part was how he had made her feel like it was somehow her fault. He had spent weeks before the breakup making little comments about how she was too serious and always talking about the future. He had made her believe that wanting stability and a real relationship was somehow a character flaw. Looking back now, she could see how he had been preparing her for the inevitable end while probably already planning his future with Jessica. Her phone buzzed on the counter, startling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend. Amy, girl, please tell me you're not actually considering this insane request. Ryan has completely lost his mind. Lisa smiled despite herself. News traveled fast in their small town of Millfield, where everyone knew everyone else's business. By now, half the town probably knew about the wedding invitation and Ryan's audacious request. She could already imagine the conversations happening at the local coffee shop and grocery store. She walked to her living room window and looked out at the quiet street where she had grown up. This was the kind of place where your reputation mattered, where people remembered everything, and where refusing to help with a wedding could make you look petty and vindictive. Ryan knew this about her. He knew she was the kind of person who always helped others, who never wanted to disappoint anyone, who would rather suffer in silence than cause a scene. For 3 years, she had been the perfect girlfriend. She had supported his dreams, encouraged his career moves, and even helped him study for his promotion at the bank. She had introduced him to her family, made him her +1 at every event, and had genuinely believed they were building something real together. She had been so naive. The sound of a car pulling into her driveway interrupted her brooding. Through the window, she saw her husband Tom getting out of his truck, his face already showing concern. He must have gotten her frantic text about the invitation. She had married Tom 6 months ago in a simple ceremony that was everything her relationship with Ryan had never been. Honest, supportive, and real. Tom walked through the front door and immediately spotted the invitation on the counter. His jaw tightened as he read it, and she watched his face go through the same emotions she had experienced: disbelief, anger, and finally protective fury. "You have got to be kidding me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This guy seriously thinks he can just waltz back into your life and ask you to sing at his wedding? After everything he put you through?" Lisa sank onto their couch, feeling the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. "I don't know what to do, Tom. If I say no, everyone in town will think I'm being bitter and jealous. But if I say yes, ... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Tom sat beside her and took her hands in his calloused ones. He was a carpenter, a man who built things instead of tearing them down, and his steady presence always calmed her racing thoughts. "Lisa, you don't owe that man anything." "Not after what he did to you?" She knew Tom was right, but the situation was more complicated than it appeared on the surface. In Millfield, she had built a reputation as the go-to singer for weddings, church events, and community gatherings. People called her whenever they needed someone with a beautiful voice and professional demeanor. Refusing to sing at Ryan's wedding might damage that reputation and hurt her standing in the community. There was also the matter of Jessica. Lisa had met her a few times at town events, and she seemed like a genuinely nice person who probably had no idea about the full story of Ryan's relationship history. Jessica likely thought the invitation was a sweet gesture, a way to include someone from Ryan's past in their celebration. She probably had no clue that Ryan had a pattern of making people feel special right up until the moment he discarded them. Over the next 3 days, Lisa barely slept. She kept replaying memories of her relationship with Ryan, trying to understand how she had missed the signs of his true character. He had been charming and attentive in the beginning, making her feel like the most important person in the world. But gradually, he had started chipping away at her confidence with small criticisms disguised as jokes or helpful suggestions. He had commented on her clothes, suggesting she dress more like the women in his office. He had discouraged her from pursuing music more seriously, saying it was just a hobby and she should focus on her real job as a nurse. He had even made her feel guilty for spending time with her friends, claiming she cared more about them than about their relationship. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Not just at Ryan, but at herself for allowing him to make her feel small and insignificant. She had spent months after their breakup questioning everything about herself, wondering if she really was too demanding or too serious or too whatever else he had implied was wrong with her. On the 4th day, something shifted inside her. She was sitting in her garden, watching the flowers she had planted with Tom, when she realized that Ryan's request wasn't just inappropriate, it was another attempt to control her narrative. By asking her to sing at his wedding, he was trying to rewrite their history, to make it seem like their breakup had been amicable and that they were still friends. She thought about all the people in town who would see her at that wedding, singing for the man who had broken her heart. What message would that send? That his behavior was acceptable? That women should just smile and be gracious no matter how badly they were treated? That evening, Lisa made her decision. She would respond to the invitation, but not in the way Ryan and Jessica expected. As she sat down to write her reply, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Ryan wanted her to sing at his wedding, and she was going to give him exactly what he asked for, just not in the way he imagined. She was done being the woman who suffered in silence, who put everyone else's comfort before her own truth. It was time for Ryan to face the consequences of his actions, and she was going to make sure he did it in front of everyone who mattered. Lisa sat at her kitchen table the next morning, staring at the blank piece of paper in front of her. She had made her decision, but now she needed to be smart about how she handled it. After 3 cups of coffee and careful consideration, she picked up her phone and dialed Jessica's number. "Hello, Jessica? This is Lisa. I got your wedding invitation yesterday." She kept her voice warm and friendly, just like she would for any other client. "I'd be honored to sing at your ceremony." The excitement in Jessica's voice was genuine and heartbreaking. "Oh my goodness, Lisa. Thank you so much. Ryan said you have the most beautiful voice he's ever heard. We're so grateful you're willing to do this for us." Lisa's grip tightened on the phone. Of course, Ryan had said that. He had always praised her voice during their relationship, telling her she could have been a professional singer if she had really tried. It was one of the few compliments he gave that didn't come with a hidden criticism attached. "I do have one request, though," Lisa continued smoothly. "I'd like to choose the song myself. I have something very special in mind that I think will be perfect for the occasion. Trust me, it's going to be memorable." Jessica practically squealed with delight. "That sounds amazing. Ryan and I love surprises. We completely trust your judgment. You know so much more about music than we do." After hanging up, Lisa felt a strange mix of guilt and determination. Jessica seemed genuinely sweet, which made this whole situation even more complicated. But Lisa reminded herself that Jessica deserved to know what kind of man she was marrying. Someone had to tell her the truth, even if it had to happen in an unconventional way, over the next few weeks. Lisa threw herself into research. She started by reaching out to old friends who might have information about Ryan's current situation. What she discovered made her blood boil all over again. Her friend Kelly, who worked at the local hair salon, told her that Ryan had been spreading stories around town about their relationship. According to the gossip Kelly had heard, Ryan was telling people that Lisa had been clingy and jealous and that he had to end things because she was holding him back from his goals. He's been painting himself as this victim who finally found true love with Jessica, Kelly explained during their coffee date. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't want to upset you when you seemed so happy with Tom. Lisa nearly choked on her latte, holding him back. I supported everything he did. I helped him study for his banking exams. I went to every work function with him. I even convinced my dad to give him financial advice when he wanted to buy that expensive car. The lies stung worse than the original betrayal. It was one thing for Ryan to break up with her, but it was another thing entirely for him to rewrite their history to make himself look better. She realized that by asking her to sing at his wedding, he was probably trying to reinforce this false narrative. Look how mature and friendly they were. Clearly, there were no hard feelings, which must mean his version of events was true. That evening, Lisa found herself in her spare room that she had converted into a small music studio. Tom had surprised her with it as a wedding gift, complete with a keyboard, microphone, and recording equipment. He had encouraged her to start performing. Again, something Ryan had always discouraged by calling it just a hobby. She sat down at the keyboard and began playing through different songs in her head. She needed something that would expose Ryan's true character, but in a way that seemed innocent on the surface. It had to be a song that people would recognize, something that would make the message crystal clear to everyone listening. As she played, Tom appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. He had been watching her carefully over the past few weeks, clearly worried about how this whole situation was affecting her. You've been spending a lot of time in here, he said gently, setting her tea on the small table beside the keyboard. Want to talk about what you're planning? Lisa looked at her husband's kind, honest face and felt a wave of gratitude. Tom was everything Ryan had never been: supportive, trustworthy, and genuinely interested in her happiness. I'm going to sing at that wedding, she said, but I'm going to make sure everyone there knows exactly who Ryan really is. Tom sat down in the chair across from her. Are you sure about this? I mean, I think the guy deserves whatever's coming to him, but I don't want you to do something you'll regret later. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful response she had come to expect from Tom. He wasn't trying to control her decision or tell her what to do. He was just making sure she had thought it through completely. I've been thinking about this for weeks, Lisa replied. Ryan has been telling lies about me all over town. He's making himself look like the victim while painting me as some kind of crazy ex-girlfriend. Meanwhile, Jessica has no idea what she's getting into. Someone needs to tell the truth? Over the following days, Lisa continued her research. She reached out to Ryan's sister Megan, who had always liked Lisa and had been uncomfortable with how Ryan had handled their breakup. They met for lunch at a small restaurant outside of town where they wouldn't be spotted by mutual acquaintances, Megan's. Revelations were even worse than Lisa had expected. I probably shouldn't tell you this, Megan said, looking around nervously. But Ryan was seeing Jessica for months before he broke up with you. He brought her to family events and introduced her as his girlfriend while he was still with you. Lisa's fork clattered against her plate. What do you mean, months? Remember when he said he was working late all those nights last spring? And those weekend business trips that seemed to come up suddenly? Megan's face was full of guilt. He was with Jessica. My mom even asked him when he was going to break up with you properly, but he said he was waiting for the right time. The right time? Lisa almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The right time had apparently been when he was sure Jessica would say yes to a proposal. Lisa had been his backup plan, someone to keep around until he was certain about his next relationship. There's something else, Megan continued hesitantly. The place where he's planning to propose to Jessica? It's that little gazebo by Miller's Lake, where you two used to go for picnics. He took her there last month and told her it was their special place now. That was the final straw. Miller's Lake had been Lisa's favorite spot, a place she had shared with Ryan during what she thought were some of their happiest moments together. The fact that he had recycled even their most meaningful locations for his new relationship showed a level of callousness that took her breath away. Lisa spent the rest of that week refining her plan. She practiced her chosen song until she could sing it perfectly, even while her emotions were running high. She researched the wedding venue and the timing of events. She even bought a new dress, something elegant and confident that would make her feel powerful on the day, the most important. Part of her preparation was mental. She practiced staying calm and composed, no matter how Ryan or anyone else reacted. This wasn't about creating drama or seeking revenge. This was about truth, about making sure Jessica knew what she was getting into, and about reclaiming her own narrative. After months of Ryan's lies, Tom watched her transformation with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You seem different," he told her one evening as they sat on their porch swing. "More determined, more, fierce." Lisa smiled, feeling a confidence she hadn't experienced in years. "I spent too long letting Ryan make me feel small and apologetic for wanting basic respect in a relationship. I'm done with that version of myself." As the wedding date approached, Lisa felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. She was ready to face Ryan, ready to tell her truth, and ready to move forward with her life. Whatever happened at that wedding, she would handle it with grace and dignity. But she would also make sure that everyone there understood exactly what kind of man Ryan really was. The night before the wedding, Lisa stood in front of her bedroom mirror in her new dress, practicing her performance one final time. Tomorrow, she would give Ryan exactly what he had asked for, a song at his wedding that no one would ever forget. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, bright sunshine, and a gentle breeze that seemed to mock the storm Lisa was about to unleash. She woke up feeling surprisingly calm, like an actress who had rehearsed her lines so many times that stage fright was no longer possible. Tom brought her coffee in bed, studying her face with concerned eyes. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked, sitting on the edge of their bed. "We can still back out." "I'll call them and say you're sick," Lisa smiled and squeezed his hand. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Today is about telling the truth, and I'm not backing down." She spent extra time getting ready, choosing her outfit carefully. The navy blue dress Tom had bought her fit perfectly and made her feel confident and elegant. She styled her hair in loose waves and applied her makeup with precision. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who knew her worth, not the insecure person Ryan had tried to make her believe she was. The wedding was being held at Riverside Country Club, the fanciest venue in their area. Lisa had performed there many times before, so she knew the layout and acoustics perfectly. As she and Tom drove up the circular driveway, she could see guests arriving in their expensive cars and designer outfits. Ryan's family had money, and they were clearly sparing no expense for this celebration. Lisa arrived early for her sound check, just like she would for any professional performance. The wedding coordinator, a stressed-looking woman named Patricia, greeted her warmly. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. The bride and groom are so excited about your surprise song. They keep asking me if I know what you're going to sing, but I told them it's your secret." If only Patricia knew how much of a secret it really was. Lisa tested the microphone and adjusted the sound levels, making sure everything was perfect. She had chosen her song carefully, something that would be immediately recognizable to everyone, but would take a few moments for the full meaning to sink in. As guests began filling the ceremony space, Lisa positioned herself in the back with Tom. She watched people she had known her whole life take their seats, many of them stealing glances in her direction. The whispers had already started. Everyone in town knew about her history with Ryan, and the fact that she was singing at his wedding had become the biggest gossip topic in weeks. She spotted Ryan's parents in the front row, looking uncomfortable despite their expensive clothing. His mother had always liked Lisa and had been visibly disappointed when Ryan announced his engagement to Jessica so soon after their breakup. His father was checking his phone repeatedly, probably dealing with business calls even on his son's wedding day. Jessica's family filled the other side of the venue. They seemed genuinely happy and excited, completely unaware of the drama that had led to this moment. Lisa felt a pang of sympathy for them. They were about to witness something that would definitely not match their expectations of a peaceful wedding ceremony. The ceremony itself was beautiful if you ignored the underlying tension. Jessica looked stunning in her white gown, radiating the kind of joy that only comes from believing you're marrying your soulmate. Ryan stood at the altar in his perfectly fitted tuxedo, playing the role of the devoted groom. But Lisa could see his nervous energy, the way his eyes kept darting around the room, the slight tremor in his hands. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections to the marriage, Lisa felt Tom tense beside her. For a wild moment, she considered standing up and speaking her truth right then and there. But she had a better plan, one that would be far more effective and memorable. After the ceremony concluded and guests moved to the cocktail area, Lisa knew her moment was approaching. The wedding coordinator had scheduled her performance for halfway through the cocktail hour, when everyone would be relaxed and social. It was the perfect time to capture maximum attention. She excused herself from Tom and made her way to the small stage area that had been set up near the bar. The room was buzzing with conversation and laughter. People were sipping champagne and sampling expensive appetizers, completely unaware that their peaceful celebration was about to take a dramatic turn. Ryan and Jessica were standing near the front of the room, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. Jessica kept looking toward the stage with excitement, clearly anticipating the musical surprise that had been promised. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed increasingly nervous. As Lisa approached the microphone, the wedding coordinator dimmed the lights slightly and called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special treat for you this evening. Lisa, who many of you know has the most beautiful voice in our community, has prepared a surprise song for our happy couple." The room fell silent as Lisa stepped up to the microphone. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, some curious, some supportive, and some clearly expecting drama. She adjusted the microphone stand and looked out at the crowd with a confident smile. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Ryan and Jessica's special day," she began, her voice clear and professional. "When they asked me to sing something meaningful for their wedding, I spent a lot of time thinking about what song would be perfect. I wanted to something that really captures the essence of their relationship and the kind of man Ryan truly is." She paused, letting her words sink in. Ryan's face had gone noticeably pale, and she could see him trying to catch her eye, probably hoping to signal her to choose something safe and generic. Jessica was beaming with anticipation, completely trusting that whatever Lisa had chosen would be beautiful and appropriate. "The song I've selected is one that I think many of you will recognize," Lisa continued. "It tells a story about truth, about consequences, and about what happens when someone treats another person badly. I hope you'll all listen carefully to the lyrics because they have a very important message." The opening notes began to play through the sound system. Lisa had chosen "Before He Cheats" by Carrie Underwood, but she had spent weeks modifying some of the lyrics to make them even more specific to her situation with Ryan. It was a song about betrayal, about lies, and about karma catching up with someone who thought they could hurt others without consequences. As she began to sing, her voice was flawless. Years of practice and professional training had prepared her for this moment. She hit every note perfectly, her voice filling the room with crystal clear precision. But it wasn't just her technical skill that captured everyone's attention. It was the emotion behind the words and the slowly dawning realization of what those words meant. The first verse was about being lied to and cheated on, about trusting someone who was living a double life. Lisa sang about late nights and business trips, about phone calls that went unanswered and explanations that never quite made sense. Anyone who had been through a similar betrayal would recognize the pain in those lyrics. By the time she reached the chorus, the room's energy had completely shifted. Conversations had stopped. Phones were coming out as guests realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Jessica's smile was beginning to fade as the meaning of the song became clear. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but Lisa wasn't finished. The second verse was even more pointed, talking about small towns and big lies, about reputations built on deception, and about the truth having a way of coming out eventually. She sang about manipulation and gaslighting, about being made to feel small and insignificant, and about finding the strength to speak up. The room was completely silent except for her powerful voice. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, transfixed by the drama unfolding on stage. This was no longer just a wedding performance. It was a public reckoning, a moment of truth that no one in that room would ever forget. As Lisa sang the final notes of her chosen song, the silence in the room was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. She had delivered every word with perfect clarity and unmistakable intention. The message was crystal clear to everyone present. This was not just a wedding performance. This was a public revelation about betrayal, lies, and consequences. Lisa stepped back from the microphone, her heart pounding but her expression calm and dignified. She looked directly at Ryan and Jessica, then swept her gaze across the stunned faces in the crowd. "Thank you for listening," she said simply. "I hope that song was as meaningful to you as it was to me. Congratulations to the happy couple. May you both get exactly what you deserve." The silence lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 seconds. Then all hell broke loose. Jessica was the first to react. Her face had gone from confused to hurt to absolutely furious as the meaning of the song became clear. She spun around to face Ryan, her white dress swirling dramatically. "What was that about?" she demanded, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Ryan, what is she talking about? What lies? What business trips?" Ryan's face had turned an alarming shade of red. He was stammering, trying to form words that wouldn't come out properly. "Jessica, that's not, she's just bitter about our breakup. You know how exes can be when they can't move on." But Jessica wasn't buying it. Lisa could see the wheels turning in the bride's mind as she remembered conversations, explanations that hadn't quite made sense, and nights when Ryan had been unreachable. "Those late nights at work when we first started dating," Jessica said, her voice getting louder. "You said you had broken up with her months before we met, but if that song is true, ... Meanwhile, the wedding guests were having their own reactions. Some were pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming the most dramatic wedding in local history. Others were whispering frantically to each other, trying to piece together the story they had just heard. A few people were actually applauding Lisa's performance. Apparently impressed by her courage, Ryan's sister Megan, who had been sitting with his family, suddenly stood up. Lisa could see the guilt and conflict on her face as she wrestled with whether to speak up. Finally, she couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Jessica, I'm so sorry," Megan called out, her voice shaking. "But what she sang ... it's true. Ryan was seeing both of you at the same time. I tried to tell him it was wrong, but he said he needed to be sure about his feelings before he made a decision." The room erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Ryan's mother put her hand over her mouth in horror, while his father looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest table. Jessica's parents, who had paid for this expensive wedding, looked absolutely mortified. "Megan, shut up!" Ryan hissed, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. Jessica's maid of honor, a woman named Claire, who had clearly been waiting for this moment, stepped forward with her phone in her hand. "Jessica, remember when I showed you those screenshots months ago? The ones where I warned you about Ryan's reputation? You said I was just being jealous and dramatic." She held up her phone, and even from across the room, Lisa could see text messages displayed on the screen. "I have proof right here that he was still calling you his girlfriend on social media while he was already dating Jessica. I screenshot everything because I knew this day would come." The crowd was now openly staring and commenting. Some of Ryan's college friends, who were standing near the bar, started laughing, not in a mean way, but in the uncomfortable way people laugh when a situation becomes so awkward it's almost surreal. "Dude, you really messed up," one of them called out. "Like spectacularly messed up?" Ryan was desperately trying to control the situation, but it was like trying to hold back a flood with his bare hands. "Everyone just calm down," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This is supposed to be a celebration. We're not going to let one bitter person ruin our special day." That was exactly the wrong thing to say. Jessica whirled around to face him again, and Lisa could see tears of rage starting to form in her eyes. "Bitter? Ryan, she just exposed you as a liar and a cheater in front of everyone we know. And instead of denying it or explaining yourself, you're calling her bitter?" Jessica's father, a successful businessman who clearly didn't appreciate public humiliation, stepped forward with the stern expression of a man who was about to take control of a situation. "Young man," he said in a voice that could freeze water, "I paid $25,000 for this wedding. If what that woman sang is true, then you have some serious explaining to do." The number of $25,000 seemed to echo through the room. Several guests whistled softly, apparently impressed by the expense, and, scandalized by the waste, Lisa watched all of this unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. She had wanted the truth to come out, but seeing Jessica's pain up close was harder than she had expected. This was a woman who had genuinely believed she was marrying the love of her life, only to discover on her wedding day that their entire relationship was built on lies. Tom appeared at Lisa's side, gently taking her arm. "I think it's time for." "You said go," he said quietly. "You've said what you needed to say." But before they could leave, Jessica broke away from the crowd around Ryan and walked directly toward Lisa. The room fell silent again, everyone waiting to see what the bride would do to the woman who had just destroyed her wedding. Jessica stopped in front of Lisa, tears streaming down her face but her posture straight and dignified. For a moment, Lisa thought she might get slapped or screamed at. Instead, Jessica spoke in a voice that was quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you," she said simply. "I needed to know the truth, and apparently you were the only person brave enough to tell me." Then she turned back to face the room full of guests. "I'm sorry, everyone, but there's not going to be a reception tonight. I need some time to think about whether I want to be married to someone who lies as easily as he breathes." Jessica's father immediately stepped up to support his daughter. "We'll handle the vendors and the refunds," he announced to the room. "Thank you all for coming, but this celebration is over." As guests began to file out, many of them stopped to speak to Lisa. Some thanked her for her courage, others shared their own stories about Ryan's questionable behavior that they had witnessed over the years. Several people mentioned that they had always suspected something wasn't right about the timeline of his relationships, but hadn't wanted to get involved. Ryan's own grandmother, a tiny woman in her 80s, shuffled over to Lisa with the help of her walker. "Honey," she said in a voice that was surprisingly strong, "I've been watching that boy make bad choices his whole life. It's about time someone held him accountable." As Lisa and Tom finally made their way to the parking lot, they could hear raised voices coming from inside the venue. Ryan was apparently still trying to salvage the situation, while Jessica was having none of it. The last thing Lisa heard was Jessica saying, "Don't you dare try to blame this on anyone else. This is exactly who you are, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise." Driving away from the country club, Lisa felt a strange mix of emotions. She was proud of herself for speaking up, relieved that the truth was finally out, and surprisingly peaceful about the whole situation. She had spent months feeling like a victim of Ryan's lies and manipulation. Today she had taken back her power and reclaimed her story. "How do you feel?" Tom asked as they pulled into their driveway. Lisa thought about it for a moment. "Free," she said finally. "For the first time in months, I feel completely free." The days following the wedding were unlike anything Lisa had ever experienced. By Sunday morning, her phone was buzzing constantly with calls, texts, and social media notifications. The story of her dramatic performance had spread far beyond their small town thanks to the dozens of guests who had recorded videos on their phones. Tom made them breakfast while Lisa scrolled through the messages, her eyes growing wider with each notification. "Honey, you need to see this," she called out. Someone posted a video on social media and it already has 50,000 views. People are calling it the most epic wedding revenge of all time. The video quality was surprisingly good, considering it had been filmed on a phone from across the room. You could clearly hear every word of Lisa's introduction and see the gradual change in the crowd's reaction as they realized what was happening. The comments section was exploding with support for Lisa and criticism of Ryan's behavior. "This woman is a legend," read one comment with thousands of likes. "She turned a wedding song into a truth bomb and delivered it perfectly." Another popular comment said, "I wish I had this kind of courage when my ex cheated on me." She's literally living out everyone's revenge fantasy. But it wasn't just strangers who were reaching out. Lisa's phone rang constantly with calls from local news stations wanting to interview her about the incident. 3 different morning shows had already called, asking if she would appear as a guest to discuss her brave stand against infidelity. "I can't believe this has gotten so big," Lisa told Tom as they sat on their porch that evening, watching the sunset. "I just wanted Ryan to face the consequences of his actions. I never expected it to become some kind of viral sensation." Tom squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Are you regretting it?" Lisa thought carefully about his question. "No," she said finally. "I'm not regretting it at all. Maybe it got bigger than I planned, but the truth needed to come out. Ryan spent months lying about me and making me look like the problem in our relationship. Now everyone knows what really happened." The most surprising call came on Monday afternoon. It was Jessica asking if they could meet for coffee. Lisa's first instinct was to say no. She had never intended to hurt Jessica personally, and she worried that a face-to-face meeting might be too painful for both of them. But something in Jessica's voice convinced her to agree. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from the curious eyes of local gossips, who were still talking about the wedding disaster. Jessica looked tired but determined as she sat down across from Lisa. She had clearly been crying, but her posture was strong and confident. "I wanted to thank you properly," she began. "And I wanted you to know what's happened since Saturday." Lisa braced herself for anger or blame, but Jessica's tone was completely calm. "I called off the wedding completely. Not just the reception, the whole marriage. I realized that if Ryan could lie to me so easily about something this important, I could never trust him about anything." "I'm sorry it happened this way," Lisa said honestly. "I know you cared about him and I never wanted to hurt you personally." Jessica shook her head. "Don't apologize. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Do you know what Ryan said when I confronted him privately after everyone left? He said that what you sang wasn't technically lying because we weren't officially exclusive during those first few months." Lisa's jaw dropped. Even after everything that had happened, Ryan was still trying to manipulate the situation with technicalities and word games. "That's when I knew for sure that you had done the right thing," Jessica continued. "A man who can stand in front of 200 people and watch his lies get exposed, and still try to justify his behavior afterward, is not someone I want to spend my life with." Jessica went on to explain that she had moved back in with her parents temporarily and was taking some time to figure out her next steps. She had also started seeing a therapist to work through the emotional manipulation she now realized she had been experiencing throughout her relationship with Ryan. "The weirdest part is that I feel relieved," Jessica admitted. "I mean, I'm embarrassed and hurt and angry, but underneath all of that, I feel like I dodged a bullet. If you hadn't spoken up, I might have spent years married to someone who lies as easily as he breathes." Over the following weeks, Lisa learned more about the fallout from her wedding performance. Ryan's reputation in their small town was completely destroyed. His job at the bank became uncomfortable when clients started asking questions about his character, and several long-term customers requested to work with different loan officers. His friend group split into 2 camps: those who defended him, and those who admitted they had always suspected he was trouble but had stayed quiet to avoid drama. Some of his closest friends revealed that they had known about his cheating, but had felt it wasn't their place to interfere. Ryan's sister Megan reached out to Lisa with a heartfelt apology. "I should have told you what was happening when I first found out," she wrote in a long text message. "I was being a coward, and I let my loyalty to my brother override doing what was right." Watching you have the courage to speak up made me realize how wrong I was to stay silent. The most unexpected consequence was the impact on Lisa's own life and confidence. Word spread quickly about her musical performance, and she started getting requests to sing at other events around town. But more importantly, people began reaching out to her for advice about their own relationship problems. Women who had been in similar situations started calling her, asking for guidance about how to handle cheating partners or manipulative boyfriends. Lisa found herself becoming an unofficial counselor for people who needed someone to validate their experiences and encourage them to stand up for themselves. "You showed all of us that we don't have to suffer in silence," one woman told her during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "My husband has been lying to me for months, and after seeing what you did, I finally found the courage to confront him." Lisa's relationship with Tom grew even stronger through all of this. Watching her stand up for herself and reclaim her power had made him fall in love with her all over again. He was proud of her courage and supported her decision completely, even when the attention became overwhelming. "You're not the same person who was dating Ryan," he told her one evening as they cooked dinner together. "You found your voice, and it's amazing to watch." Lisa had also started taking her music more seriously again. The confidence she had gained from her wedding performance inspired her to start performing at local venues and even writing her own songs. She realized that Ryan's discouragement of her musical interests had been just another form of control, designed to keep her small and dependent on his approval. 6 months after the wedding, Lisa received a letter that surprised her. It was from Jessica, who had moved to a larger city and started a new job. She wrote that she was dating someone new, a man who was honest, supportive, and everything Ryan had pretended to be. "I wanted you to know that your courage changed my life," Jessica wrote. "Not just because you exposed Ryan's lies, but because you showed me what it looks like when someone refuses to accept mistreatment. I learned to recognize my own worth because of your example." As for Ryan, Lisa heard through the small-town grapevine that he had eventually moved away, claiming he needed a fresh start somewhere people didn't know his history. Several people mentioned that he had tried to contact both Lisa and Jessica multiple times, but both women had blocked his number and refused to engage with his attempts at manipulation. A year later, Lisa's wedding performance had become local legend. People still talked about it at community events, often pointing her out as the woman who sang the truth at that wedding. New residents to the town would eventually hear the story and seek Lisa out, wanting to meet the person who had become famous for her courage. Lisa never regretted her decision to speak up that day. She had transformed a moment of potential humiliation into a declaration of her own worth and dignity. More importantly, she had inspired other people to find their own voices and refuse to accept mistreatment in their relationships. Looking back, she realized that the wedding performance had been about much more than exposing Ryan's lies. It had been about reclaiming her story, standing up for her truth, and showing everyone, including herself, that she deserved respect and honesty in all of her relationships. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to stay silent. When someone tries to rewrite your history,